Well, peace, 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 fam. How's everybody doing? Happy Saturn Day. This is our Saturn Day sit down. I am Oracle Deborah with the Oracle Deborah podcast on YouTube. Um, so welcome again. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing and commenting. I appreciate that. I'm going to get right to it. I have been paying attention to what's going on with the DOE in the country and how basically the new administration is shutting it down due to the poor performance of our students. Um, I don't have any makeup on, so forgive me. Due to the poor, except for lifting, due to the poor performance of students in the classroom here in America. And Trump has been very clear about his dissatisfaction with the overall student performance in the states, um, and how we're struggling to keep up behind other countries who are not as essentially strong as us. And I agree. Let me just say that I agree. I have long had angst about the public school system here in America, um, and also even as a young married woman at the time, how difficult it was to enroll my child in a school in the area that I was in. Let me be clear. In the area that I was in, due to stringent work work schedules and traffic and the distance to where the school was that I was able to identify with, all these factors played a key role in having to essentially put my son back, uh, put my son or my child in public school, which I had angst about as a student myself many years ago when at the transition, right at the transition of going from elementary school to middle school, they changed the boundary lines and sent literally one half of my block, whoever lived on one side of the street, right? Because there's houses on both sides of the street. One side of the street had to go across town to a school in a neighborhood they had no familiarity with. You're not really supposed to go through that transition as a child until you go to high school. And even then, most of the students are familiar with one another in high school. They literally ripped our community apart by making this decision, um, and traumatizing, really, traumatizing a whole host of us students to go to a school to save a school. That was the point. It was to save a school that was not doing well academically, and and the behavior had become a problem. So, at 12 and 13 years old, we were sent across town to save a school, basically. Now, I, I, I've learned through time that everything happens for a reason. Fate happens for a reason. It was at this school that I was sent across town to, which was very tumultuous in my first year. Like, it was wild. Um, but they were the first persons to give me a scholarship. Like I got, it wasn't a big scholarship, but I got a $500 scholarship, which I was able to use towards um, junior college when I left high school. I went from junior college, I got my degree, worked for years, and then went back and got my full bachelor's degree. Uh, but that $500 came in handy at the time when I needed it. You feel me? Um, but even then, still, my academics suffered because there was so much more stress involved with how am I going to manage the school? There were so many fights going on. There was so much bullying going on because we were the new kids on the block. And there was so much of a lot of things going on. Whereas if I had gone to middle school with my peers from elementary school, there would have been a whole lot less of that going on and more focus on academics. And while my mother literally went down to the Board of Education every Monday, she literally went down there every Monday for almost 3 years. On the third year, they told her, you know what, you can just stop applying, asking us to get her out of the school and into this other school that I wanted to go to because she's doing well and the what would you call it? The experiment worked. The grade levels are rising, the scores are rising, the violence is calming down. So they sacrificed my development, our development, for the betterment of a school, which actually is still standing there today. And this was eons ago. So yes, their experiment worked, but it worked on the backs of our development. And I particularly hurt uh, and was hurt over that decision. Okay. So getting back to the DOE, that was my little gray school story. Getting back to the DOE, Trump, the administration has dismantled the DOE. I say I agree. And let me tell you why. Because decades down the road, I finished my bachelor's degree and I go on to grad school, which I go on to grad school and I'm in research and writing. And I probably was taking a major I wasn't supposed to take. That was not in my game plan. Someone else kind of changed the game plan for me. And the powers that be didn't like it, pretty much. And I also had quit my very steady job, had gone on to management in alignment with my degree because I figured if I'm going to get a new degree, I want a new job and more money. Well, I got a new job, but I didn't get more money. And it was and it didn't work well with a grad school schedule, with any school schedule. Okay. Because I ended up in retail management, which I had never done before, and you're running all over the place and there's no time to sit down. And yeah, it just didn't work. But anyway, let me tell you what my very strong research was before they kicked me out of grad school. Um, and the research was on teacher perceptions and equity in the classroom, and why teachers need to embrace boys in elementary and middle schools and sustain girls in high school. Now, here was the abstract. Research on teachers' perceptions of students in the classroom probes the decline in boys' academic achievement in elementary and middle schools in relation to differential teacher treatment towards boys, while girls receive ample teacher attention and academic success at same grade levels. Let me get my glasses. I hope this doesn't throw off everything. Makes me look a little studious, but I can at least see a little better. When students enter high school, educators begin to show greater interest in boys' academic achievement as boys receive increased teacher attention, while girls experience less teacher attention, and educators grow more concerned about girls' math capabilities. Research shows that gender stereotypy of this nature reinforces societal ideology and stagnates students' academic performance. An investigation of teachers' negative perceptions towards students in the classroom examines how shifts in teachers' perceptions can positively affect student-teacher relations and improve and maintain academic achievement for students at all grade levels. The research method involves conducting focus groups and in-depth interviews of mixed gender students, parents, and teachers, all who play a critical role in students' academic success. So it goes on to say when teachers fail to embrace boys in elementary through middle school and girls in high school, teachers stagnate and in some cases destroy the enthusiasm, trust, and ingenuity of young people over the course of their academic life. According to a 2001 report released by the National Center for Education Statistics, NCES, of the U.S. Department of Education, 2004, 12.2% of males drop out of school between grades 10 through 12, while the dropout percentage for girls is 9.3%. Of these percentages, 3.6% is Asian Pacific Islander, 7.3% white, 10.9% Black, and 27% Hispanic. Over the years, numerous studies have probed gender matters in the classroom. While earlier studies focused on student-teacher relations, other studies focused on girls and their performance in the classroom. However, since the decline of boys' performance in the classroom, later research studies focused on the attitudes of teachers towards boys in the classroom. More recent studies indicate that teachers treat boys differently from girls in the classroom. Beeman, Weldahl, and Kemp, 2006, that's my source. Boys interviewed in elementary and middle school say that both male and female teachers treat boys unfairly in the classroom. Boys assert that teachers deal with them harshly, and more often than girls, they treat them harshly and more often than girls when administering discipline in the classroom, even in the absence of misbehavior. Culling Forward, 1993. Researchers have followed girls' academic achievement in the classroom in comparison to boys. Research studies reveal that girls engage more often in the classroom than boys, Marks 2000, and that reading levels for girls is higher than for boys, Serbin, O'Leary, Kent, and Tonic, 1983. I'm sorry, 1973. And there was a message there for me. Yeah. This professor named Deborah, she's a Jewish professor. Um, she was she was a feminist in this particular class, and she did not like the fact that I was pro male or less feminist. She didn't like the fact, because she also didn't like the fact that I was an Eagles fan. Um, and uh, yeah, she sabotaged my research. I think I needed 7 points to maintain a B in the classroom. She found exactly 7 points in my paper to kick me out of grad school. 7 points. While she states my research was good, while she never stated that through the process when you're doing this research and you're having to do papers every week, she never stated, I need more research here. Where is your point here? Where is your point there? She never stated any of these things. She waited until I did the full paper, did the presentation. The the whole class was astounded because they thought, okay, she's failing, she's not going to make this class, until I did my presentation for my final exam. And they were like, wow. So even if I just needed 7 points to stay in the class, and even if she didn't really have to look for 7 points, which she did, the fact that I made a significant impact on this topic in my research should have said, listen, we need her to continue because she has made an impact in this topic. 7 points? You get kicked out of grad school? It's like $10,000 a class almost for 7 points. Let me tell you something. All these teachers and professors have favorites. And there was a guy who was from another country whom she favored, who sat right up next to her, literally snuggled up next to her at the front of the classroom. And there was nothing that kid did that was wrong. There was nothing, nothing. Here I am, a working parent. I'm on a job that I'm working like crazy hours. I'm traveling like into DC during rush hour. You're stressed out looking for parking, and she would lock you out the class if you didn't get there on time. So my question is, what is grad school really about at Johns Hopkins? This research was counterintuitive to the agenda of the powers that be. They could not have this kind of research get out there like that. They were not going to push it out there like that. So they kicked me out the class. And when they had, you know, speakers come, they had the head of FEMA come after Katrina had occurred. If any of you know about Katrina, that was the storm that basically leveled that leveled New Orleans, the hurricane, and people were left basically destitute. And this guy was, I can't think of his name, but he was getting blamed for it, and they had him there. And when he came and he talked about it, and it was fine. He wanted to talk about his position, but I wanted to know, why were people left stranded? People want to know this question. And he was offended. He was offended. This a layperson wanted to know, hey, this is what they're saying in the news. This is why they needed people like me in journalism, in communications, in the news. You see what's happened in the last election? Softball questions. Let me give you an alley oop. What the hell is that? What is that? How is that realistic? But policy is realistic. So I come on here on my SaturnDay sit down to talk about a very real thing that happens in this country, and specifically in the Black, Indigenous American, Foundational Black American community. If you notice, 10% of Black Americans, Black American boys, were dropping out of school. Now you say, what about the 27% who are Hispanic? Well, that is the job of the Hispanics to address that and everything that was going on with that community. But my research was about boys across the board. My paper, you can't see, but my paper even goes as far as Europe. It talks about how boys felt about being in the classroom under male tutelage and female tutelage. This research was rock solid. It was very clear that girls were favored in the earlier years of their education, K basically through middle school. But it was in high school, they basically threw them off to the side. They focused on boys. They actually were more scared of boys. Boys had grown into their manhood, basically. They were into sports. They had developed in a different kind of way, and the teachers favored them. They still favor them in high school, but not at the critical years when they need it. So you ask why boys are angry, why they act out. Well, treat them better in their earlier years of education. This educational system didn't work. That's why Trump is dismantling it. Now you'll get some idiot coming on and who may ever hear this and be like, well, that was just your issue, and that I've never had that. And you'll get a bunch of, black folks that come in and say, I never had that issue. Listen, stop playing. I got the research here. I have the research, and it's significant. Now, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. I'm going to jump around in this research paper. I talk about girls too and their, how they're faring in the classroom. I wrote this paper, by the way, in 2008. So this is how, and I never went back to grad school. I just never continued to work. And one might say, well, when you were that dedicated to it, it was also very pricey. We were looking at student loans and how impossible it became to pay them back as well. So if we can just consider that. As a matter of fact, for my undergrad, I was at the University of Maryland University College and doing very well when I returned to school. I was on the dean's list after the first year. And then I got a letter while I was in a hospital. While I was in the hospital, I got a letter. They brought me my mail and said to me that they were taking additional credits away from me. Literally. They had already taken half my credits from the college work I had done years ago. I took the hit. And then after getting on the dean's list, they decided we're going to take 19 more credits away from you because you're doing so well. This is academia, my friends. This is what academia does to a lot of people. So I had to find a school online, which was unprecedented then, that was fully accredited and recognized as a whatever you call it, like a 4-year degree, whatever. Like I found all the credits of them just so I could pay less and owe less in student loans. Yes, I am responsible. Absolutely, I am. Give me 1 second, okay? Give me one more break. I don't know where I left off. I found some places where, um, like I said, I'm jumping around. I'm jumping around and I'm going to read some other key points in my paper. All right. Now, this portion says this is the literature review. It says existing literature or literature supports that the claim that boys experience differential teacher treatment from preschool. Let me say that again. From preschool through middle school. While this differential teacher treatment diminishes as boys enter high school, the national dropout rates for boys remain higher than girls, while the reading scores for boys remain lower than girls. In turn, the so-called favor girls receive in elementary and middle school diminishes as girls receive less teacher attention in the classroom, while educators distress over girls' capabilities in math and science. Studies on teachers' perceptions of students, classroom diversity, and social stereotypy will be explored as research concludes that educators bear the responsibility of maintaining equity in the classrooms by adopting a balanced perception of classroom gender to promote academic achievement for boys and girls at every grade level. At every grade level. Now, why would a boy want to stay and maintain and continue through high school after going through all that trauma from preschool all the way through middle school? all of that negative reinforcement, and you want them to graduate high school to want to come to class. You have broken their their spirit of wanting to learn. And then you gossip girls all the way from preschool through middle school, and then treat them differently when they get in high school, which is like a culture shock. But they're graduating because they're writing on how they were treated from preschool through middle school. And you want this system to continue? This is the system you want to continue. This is the system that we're supposed to be okay with. It doesn't work. It's never worked. The scores tell us that it doesn't work. The dropout rates tell us that it doesn't work. And you're upset that we're dismantling a system that fundamentally kills the spirit, the learning spirit of our males and eventually our females. You got everything all twisted. No wonder boys end up having this disdain for girls. And girls have an unnatural power over boys. The educational system has reinforced this as if this is normal. No, my friends, this doesn't work. It's never worked. In my earlier research, it even talks about, I think it might have been called the book Raising Cain, talks about how even the educational system makes you sit there, children sit there at a desk with their hands folded. That's not how children learn. They learn through touch and feel and movement and play. And you stand there making them fold their hands in the classroom. Sit still. And then you discipline them for not sitting still. This system is so effed up. It is meant for failure. It is meant to marginalize our children. See, white males, white females will go on, they'll get the jobs anyway. They'll get into the colleges they want because they're white, because of white privilege, basically. But what about the rest? Black Americans fought, literally, blood, sweat, tears, water hoses, dogs sicked on us, bombing our churches, Jim Crow, redlining. You continue to terrorize Black America. And you started in the classrooms from their infancy almost. A woman who is pregnant and living in America is going to almost always receive some level of hostility. Try being Black and pregnant in America, going to the store and say, I really need to use a bathroom. Sorry. Immediately, our bathrooms are for public use. A pregnant woman, or to be on your job and say, oh, we know that, the medical field says you need to be out at least 6 weeks to have a baby, but you only get 3 weeks of maternity leave. What? Does that even make freaking sense? Does it? That type of hostility. This is where Europe exceeds us in caring for our expectant parents and their babies. Not America. So you got all of that going on, then eventually they make it to preschool, and this is what the boys have to deal with. From preschool to kindergarten, all the way through the fifth grade or sixth grade, wherever elementary school ends for you, into high school, into middle school, seventh, eighth, ninth grades. Again, depending on where you are, where middle school starts for you. That's a long time to say you're not valued. You're a bother being here. That's how boys feel. Like, am I a bother being here because I'm here? They're going to take out their frustration on somebody. Anyway, so this is the research I found. Um, all right. All right, so this is interesting. Research studies prove that differential teacher treatment exists towards boys beginning in preschool through the middle school grade levels, as we talked about. As research concluded, boys' classrooms behavior in their method studies in relation. All right, let me reread this because so boys' classrooms behavior and their methods studies in relation to differential teacher treatment. Research concluded that teachers' gender perceptions differ in relation to discipline, with teachers administering more stringent punishment to boys than girls. The increased presence of female teachers at the lower grade levels has shown to be less effective on boys' academic achievement than girls, and this differential treatment towards boys has shaped boys' attitude. What did I just say? It has shaped boys' attitudes towards girls, teachers, educators, and society at large. And we want to know why these men are crashing out with these, you know, mass shootings. We want to know. The first mass shooting in America was at Columbine. We want to know. We don't want to take responsibility for what we're doing in the classroom at preschool level. Yeah. All right. Let's continue. All right. Let's talk about this research. Lisa Serbin, K. Daniel O'Leary, and Ronald Kent, 1973, conducted an observational method study on the frequency of teachers responding to disruptive behavior of boys and girls. Serbin et al. Sampled 15 preschool classes at 3 private nursery schools. These are private nursery schools, and 1 privately operated daycare center in New York. The study observed 15 white female teachers whose classroom enrollment was 12 to 17 students, ranging from 3 to 5 years of age. The children were predominantly white, 3 were black, 4 were Asian, from lower to middle class working families. Serbin et al. Found that all the teachers responded to boys' aggressive behavior in comparison to no responses from teachers for girls, and that girls received significantly more teacher attention when physically closer to teachers than did boys. Despite not specifying the time and length of observations, Serbin et al. Conducted a strong meta-analysis as the nursery schools and daycare centers are indicative of most preschool environments employing dominant single-sex, single ethnic group teachers. The authors trained 3 males and 2 females as observers, balancing the gender observations, and revealed that only 1/3 of the teachers at the nursery schools and daycare center were certified by the state of New York, showing that children as young as 3 years of age were placed in the care of non-certified, undertrained teachers. Serban et al. Confirmed their hypothesis that teachers' response to boys' disruptive behavior occurred more often and with more intensity than girls, concluding that further investigation on student-teacher relations is needed to ensure that education does not limit the social and intellectual freedom of students. Now, Oscar Barberin and Giselle Crawford, 2006, conducted an observation research method on practices in pre-kindergarten, pre-K programs concerning disparate treatment of Black American boys, foundational Black American boys. Barber and Crawford used 2 teams of young, college-educated white women to observe pre-K programs in 6 states, unnamed due to anonymity of the programs, in every region of the country, excluding the Northwest region and New England. The authors do not specify the reason for this limitation or the race and gender of teachers and students. The trained teams observed 100 randomly selected classrooms for 6 days, documenting observations based on the instructional and emotional classroom climate. Barberin et al. Concluded that pre-K settings were breeding grounds. They were breeding grounds for stigmatization and disparate treatment of Black foundational American boys. Stigmatization was found to be so intense that the authors were compelled to report a white female student informing a teacher how bad another Black male student was as the girl pointed to the boy from a distance. The authors reported no observation of this behavior by the Black male student at that time. Stigma brands a person or group of people with an undesirable mark of character or illness. Based on the accounts of the method observers, Barbara and Crawford's research study leaped from hypothesis to immediate intervention. The authors accurately conclude that teachers ought to examine their perception of boys' behaviors to discern whether misinterpretation exists and if their response to boys' behavior is overreaction. Barber and Crawford advised teaching professionals to engage in self-assessment prior to entering the classroom to examine underlying attitudes and values that affect personal and professional behavior. They kicked me out of grad school for exposing this. That's why they kicked me out of grad school. I have never had a need to go back to grad school because I know my research is always going to expose things like this, and they're not going to have it. They want to program grad students for a narrative and ideology to put out there in the world to continue their dysfunction and their toxicity. And thank God Pluto is in Aquarius to expose all the truth. And here it is, 17 years later, I get to talk about this. Now call me anti-Semitic for actual research done in this classroom. Or for this professor saying, ugh, she likes the Eagles. What the hell does the fact that I like the Eagles have to do with my work, me making it into grad school? You know how hard I worked studying through the night, working full-time through the day? And your only response to me is, ugh, she likes the Eagles? Lady, grow up. Grow up. As a matter of fact, why don't you get your perceptions together? It's your type of perception is why this thing is going on in the classrooms, affecting our young children, our babies. Yeah, y'all go on and resegregate us. Just go on and segregate us. We don't need you. You've done enough damage. You've done enough damage. Don't need you. All right, then continuing. Let's see. Then they went on to talk to the children about how the children feel. It says Cedric Cohen for 1993 explored gender issues in the classroom from the children's perspective. Cullingford believed that not only were children able to communicate their perceptions of the school environment, children are smart, stop playing, but they were also interested in the ways teachers behave in the classroom towards children, saying, quote, children are very close observers of teachers, end quote, behavior, and are very articulate about signs of prejudice or unfairness. Stop playing with me. Stop playing. You think they weren't going to talk? They came at my son and he talked to me. And boy, did I let them know. And they tracked him. They tracked him. But be careful, people in your community that look like you and will throw you under the bus like a woman did in my neighborhood, threw my son under the bus to make sure that her son did not get tracked. Let me tell you about that lack mindset, that lower level lack mindset, the bones and biscuits, the League of Mammies, as Vicky calls them, Vicky Diller calls them. Be careful. Yeah, be careful of them. You can't just protect your children against whites and other groups who are now coming out very brazenly about their prejudice towards us, i.e., Hispanics and other groups. You got to watch out for the League of Mammies or the Bones and Biscuits trying to get theirs, the Boulay. Yeah, those. This is Saturday. This is SaturnDay. Sit down. This is what we do here. Okay. All right. So let's continue. Deborah Myhill and Susan Jones, 2006, investigated why boys were underachieving in the classroom, recognizing that schools play a key role in either reinforcing or changing societal beliefs regarding gender behaviors. If boys' underachievement was the result of negative treatment by teachers towards boys in the classroom, then Myhill and Jones's purpose was to find a solution to the problem rather than, quote, simply describing the status quo, end quote. Therefore, the authors conducted focus group interviews of 44 teachers and 144 students from 36 different classrooms, 15 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and 1 high school in England. Based on responses from the interviews, Myhill and Jones conducted a content analysis of 6 of the 15 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and 1 high school. And in their study, Myhill and Jones found that, quote, almost without exception, end quote, the students perceived teachers as behaving more negatively towards boys than girls. 84% of 136 comments made by the students showed that teachers treated boys unfavorably in the classroom. 8% believed the opposite was true, while 30% believed there was no difference. Myhill and Jones state that there is a growing perception that teachers have different gender expectations in the classroom, with girls being the favored gender. This perception of teachers, along with students' perceptions that boys ought to be disciplined harsher than girls, confirms gender stereotypy and its existence in societal ideology. Appropriate attention must be given to student perceptions in the classroom as they outweigh uncertainty of differential teacher treatment towards boys in the preschool through middle school classrooms, and researchers have rightfully concluded that the presence of differential teacher treatment of boys based on gender, race, feminism, or perceived behavioral motives suffocates academic achievement and reinforces social stereotypy. Then talks about the increased attention of boys in high school, the challenges girls face upon entering high school. Listen to this. The DOE continued to report higher reading scores for girls. Concern for girls' interest and performance in math takes on greater attention from educators. Feminism or girls' rights become more significant to girls as they enter high school and grapple with societal norms and ideologies. As girls begin to experience less teacher attention at the secondary school level, teacher engagement remains consistent as girls maintain a higher academic performance. See, told you. But they're mucking them up on the inside. Like, where's my attention? Why are you not? Why are you treating the boys with more attention than us? Like, what happened to us? Trauma. That's trauma. To be treated one way all these years and all of a sudden it drops off. Like you just dropped off a cliff. But the fact that they treated them so well from preschool all the way through middle school set a standard of them having success in the classroom. So why would that drop off in high school? No, that's not going to drop off. But emotionally, they feel the brunt of it. Emotionally. And like boys, who will deal with this dissatisfaction towards others, girls are going to do it too, but in their own way. Stop playing. All right, so let's see. At some point, let me go back because it talks about in the UK. Elizabeth Fraser, 1989, conducted a focus group and an observational analysis of teenage girls concerning feminism. Fraser observed the discourse of two groups of girls, aged 17. One group enrolled in public school, the other group enrolled in a single-sex private school, both in the UK. Fraser found that both groups of girls spoke more about inequality and social norms, such as positive labeling of boys who were sexually promiscuous, as opposed to negative labels of girls who act same way. The teenage girls also spoke of not wanting to be treated differently because of their gender and the need to be taken seriously. The public school girls were more versed in class relations as opposed to girls from single-sex private schools who appeared to be uninformed in social class differences. Fraser reported that the observed participants did not label themselves feminists and even scorned feminism and found feminist talk did not encompass the issue of gender equality. So it was okay that they were treated differently in the earlier years, right? So that was okay. And they get in high school and the script flips. And now the promiscuity of boys is favored while it's looked down on girls. See? Causing trauma. Listen, I think it's clear that if you treat children as human beings from the beginning, right? Preschool all the way through middle school, they're going to have this a similar success rate in high school, despite the societal changes as they go along and boys acting this. Boys might even act differently because of that. Girls will probably act differently because of that, because they've been highly favored and cuddled from preschool through middle school, where boys were neglected. So different treatment will get different responses. If you train girls from those young age that boys matter, that they don't get to manipulate them and get favor from the teachers. See, this is where all this starts. Men talk about women and you do these things, and now you're having to take accountability for where they never had to take accountability for it because it was ingrained in them from preschool, from adults, that this was okay. And now men are making women accountable and women are crashing out. This is why the DOE needs to go away. This is why it has gone away because make it does not make for balanced individuals. It does not make for harmony amongst the genders, male and female, and it does not make for higher scores, in terms of competing, in terms um, of 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 what's the word I want to use? Of igniting their brilliance, their natural brilliance. Does not make for that. Does not allow the students, you know, to focus on, you know, we're in this classroom for this reason and have a higher purpose. Not being there and have white females cuddle girls and cuddle their groups, while ignoring other groups. Like how is that supposed to work for the betterment of the country? Get your priorities in check. This is for the betterment of the country. You do things to dumb down our children. Like, what the hell? Who is making these decisions? Are they from other countries? It just makes you want to ask questions. People are upset that the white men are back in power. But what did Obama do? What did Biden do? He's a white man. What did he do? He opened those borders wide open. All right, let's continue. All right. So they talk more about, I went through the girls, which I read a portion of that on. I'm jumping around. All right. What's the reason I came to this page? Um, I'm just going to read this paragraph, and then maybe I'll understand why I marked this page. So Jane Stake and Jonathan Katz, 1982, explore how teachers respond to students in various situations in the classrooms. Stake and Katz conducted a qualitative method study observing 21 teachers, 11 women and 10 men, in 4 suburban schools. Stake and Katz probed teachers' interactions with 4th to 6th grade students in the classroom. They found that female teachers responded with more praise to students than male teachers, and that boys received more loud reprimands from both male and female teachers than did girls because of boys' behavior in the classroom, concluding that boys had more disciplinary problems than girls. One second, babe. One second. All right, more disciplinary problems than girls. So, without knowing which region the study was conducted and whether the teachers were chosen or volunteers, Stake and Katz's sample lacked specificity. I hope I said that right because I normally don't mess that word up. Specificity and cannot be generalized to the population at large. But finally, Gita Kedar KEDAR Voivodis's 1983 interactional analysis of teachers' attitudes towards children's school and sex roles was timely and judicious. Kedar Voivodis analyzed prior research conducted on the critical role schools play in developing children's social identity in connection with the child's learning pattern. Research reveals that sex is a direct correlation to children's social acceptance in the classroom. While most girls fit the receptive or conformist learning role, most boys fit the active or nonconformist learning role, stigmatizing boys entering pre-kindergarten. In other words, in other words, boys are faced with the disadvantage of being immediately challenged with the expectation to conform to a belief system as defined and adopted by educational institutions. Kadar Voivodis concludes that teacher bias exists in favor of students, assuming the receptive or conformist learning role, resulting in conflict concerning student expectations in the classroom. Researchers can no longer question whether differential teacher treatment towards boys exists in the classroom. Gita, Kadar, and Voivodis' 1983 research proves that our educational system reinforces such treatment based on an antiquated belief system. Educational institutions must redefine children's learning and sex roles in the classroom by expanding diversity and retraining educators on gender and learning perceptions of students' academic capabilities. Diversity, DEI, never benefited foundational Black Americans. So even though this research is saying there must be diversity, i.e. more men at the lower grade levels, more training, more conscious perceptions of their ideology, their form of diversity didn't work. Who did DEI benefit? It benefited white women. First and foremost, white women. And then it benefited white men. And then it benefited Asians. And then it benefited Hispanics. And then it benefited who else? Everybody in the freaking world except foundational Black Americans. And we ask why we're getting rid of DEI. Now, if you're not foundational Black American, why would you care? Well, we care. And now you're asking us, why are you not here protesting with us? Because we care. All right, let's continue. Where did I leave off? Oh, yeah, yada, yada, yada about the diversity and academic ignorance. Girls suffer academically because they face the abrupt change in teacher attention upon entering high school. Recognizing that learning roles shift in favor of boys as gender stereotypy and societal ideology reinforce the other, a shift in teachers' perceptions at the lower grades will balance equity in the classrooms and will lay a solid foundation for academic excellence for boys and girls through high school. Yeah. So the question was then asked, how can educators partner with parents to balance perceptions of boys and girls in elementary and middle school classrooms to eliminate boys' underachievement and girls' struggle to compete in high school? My professor wanted to know, where did the parents come in all this? Well, if you're going to have these changes go on in the classroom, shouldn't parents be involved in all of this? If you're going to talk about methods and solutions to a problem, right? Where in all of this research were the parents even added? Nowhere. So I was like, let's get the parents involved. Because nowhere in this research did it talk about the parents. Or where the parents, none of my research talk to the parents. My solution was get the parents involved. That is the one element that no one ever talked about. They talked about the teachers, they talked about the students, they talked about the male teachers, the female teachers, the whites, the they didn't even talk about Black teachers. A lot of this research was based on white female teachers. But nowhere did any of these incredible researchers ever talk about the parents. Well, I'm a researcher. So I was like, we need to talk to the parents. And my professor was like, where did the parents come? Well, the parents didn't come in that. That's the problem. That's the problem. We put our children in these schools and the teachers take over. And they're like, you go work and whatever, we got this. Well, no, you don't have this. You failed miserably. You didn't involve the parents. Parents are only involved when there's bad behavior. Then parents are involved. But if you get parents involved from the beginning, then that holds them accountable for their children from the beginning. So you get these children and you're like, okay, we get to work with a very soft brain and we can program them. You don't want the parents involved because then you can't control and breed a narrative that basically results in failure on everybody's part. Your part too. If the students are failing, the teachers have failed. And in all of this, not one time was parent mentioned in there. Not one. Not in all of my research. And I said, let's get the parents involved. And they kicked me out of grad school. So there you have it. All right. So that's my reason that, yes, why we need to get rid of DOI. Not because of my feelings, it was because of research. Very solid research. Research that got me kicked out of grad school. But that's okay. I win in the end. Break it all down, tear it all up. Because I know what it was like as a parent to have to come up against that system. I had no intentions of working with a system to acquiesce to a system that fundamentally wanted my son to fail. I had no intentions of acquiescing to that. And yes, they absolutely trigger PTSD. I had a hard time letting go of that experience from pre-K to 12th grade. Because for Black boys, foundational Black American boys, they don't stop the track at middle school. They continue it through high school unless they're star athletes. How stupid is that? Yeah. So this is why Trump is getting rid of DOE. This is why he should get rid of DOE. This is why segregation is necessary. Again, what is our spending power? $1.3 trillion, if not more. A brother went on the Breakfast Club and said that we are the seventh richest country based on that number alone. Stop playing. So, bye-bye, DOE. All right, beloveds. This is Oracle Deborah with the Oracle Deborah podcast on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in on my Saturn Day sit down. I wish you a very lovely weekend. It is expected to be approximately 80 degrees today, so please enjoy the weather. I love you. Thank you again for liking, sharing, and subscribing. Peace, peace.